Excellent. Thank you. We're so excited to be here. And really, we are going to go over quickly how to create your own GOTV field plan with some of the tips and tricks. And then in our mini session, we'll actually be creating some of those plans. Next slide. And so some of this we've talked about today already, but going from persuasion to getting out the vote should feel like an entirely new campaign. So persuasion, your messaging is about the candidate. And get out the vote, your messaging is urgent and includes social pressure. We're not going to talk a lot about this because that was much of what Mary Bogus covered. Your universe is very different. Oh, go back. The universe is very different. When you are in persuasion, it's persuadable and you're talking to some of your base. In GOTV, you are really going after your base, your ID'd supporters, and some other supporters that you know would show up and vote for you if they just turn out. Fundraising during persuasion time takes up a lot of the candidates' time. Hopefully, by the time you get to GOTV, you're done with fundraising. If you're not, it takes up less time and it's all based on urgency. And then finally, during persuasion, data management is all about IDing voters that support you. Whereas during GOTV, data management is about who has voted, who's turned in ballots, who's requested ballots, who's showing up to the polls. And so Leah and I are going to go through each step of this, of how GOTV is a brand new campaign plan and how to make one that works. Leah?
Yep. So next slide. So you want to think about, especially you want to create your perfect GOTV universe, right? So you want to think about all your ones and twos and your threes, all your folks that you have identified that have said, yes, I want to support, or as if you were a candidate, or if you are a volunteer, or you're thinking about who are the folks that you have engaged in your universe to say, yes, I'm turning out to vote, right? So if in the case you're the candidate, right? If your ones, your twos, and your threes don't get you to your win number, you also want to add in those voters who are less engaged, but who you believe, based off of what you've heard on the ground from your canvassers, based off of your interactions, what you've heard from the phones, that if you were to reach out to them, they would show up, right? I know for me, I did this during my campaign. I took what they would frame as a risk to engage voters who didn't typically turn out to vote or had never voted before for this reason. It's that you want to make sure that you are being intentional with respect to your campaign and getting people to turn out. Also, you want to think about your budget as relates to you creating your universe, right? That can often determine the extent in which you can have reach. So you definitely want to factor in your budget, intel that you've gotten from volunteers. You want to factor all of that in. So a pro tip here I wanted to share, always trust your gut, right? You know your community. You are, if you're from your community, you've been doing work in your community, you know your community. You've spent at least over 100+ days specifically in campaign mode. You've gotten intel from knocking on doors, calls, feedback from volunteers. So you know that there is a population of folks that are willing to turn out. You just have to ask them more directly at this point. And I see there's a question here about 1, 2s, and 3s. I think we dropped it in the chat here. So yes. So I'll just share real quick before we go to messaging. Yes, your ones are, yes, I'm voting for you. Twos, I'll probably vote for you. Threes are, I might, but I'm undecided. That's what that means, just for folks didn't know what 1, 2s, and 3s are.
Yep, and Vote Run Lead has a lot of training on field and persuasion, so check those trainings out. And it goes into 4s and 5s, which hopefully you don't get many of those, but 4s are leaning towards your opponents. And 5s are the people that definitely won't vote for you.
They ain't rocking with you at 5.
Right. And you just drop them off your list because you don't want to spend any GOTV money on them, right? Mm-hmm. No GOTV money. And so Leah shared an example of some voters that she went after in her campaign that she just knew if they showed up that they'd vote for her. I did that in my campaign as well. There are a lot of young moms in my district. I'm a mom, and I knew that if they turned out, they'd be voting for me. And so we included some voters that were unlikely to turn out because it was a non-presidential year. So voters that generally only voted during presidential years, but voters we thought were moms that I would identify with me, and we included them in our GOTV universe. So trust your gut too, right? You know your community. You've been door knocking if it's non-COVID year. In a COVID year, you've been texting, calling, reaching out to voters. You and your volunteers are going to have a sense, and like we said earlier, campaigns are a little bit of science and a little bit of art. So trust your gut here and do that. And so we did go over messaging a little bit and with Mary, and so it's urgent, there's social pressure, you're creating a plan. However, this is also when the attacks are going to come, right? And hopefully the attacks are going to come. Take it as a badge of honor, because if they're attacking your campaign, if they're attacking
that means you're about to win this thing. They're nervous.
Yep, it means they're nervous. It means you're about to win. And you don't have to respond to every attack, but you might need to respond to some. And you might have to do that rapidly. So put that in your plan and be aware. Now you're going to want to respond to every single attack, right? Because it's painful and it hurts. And so I have something that I call my neighbor test. So I have some great neighbors. They are not super politically involved, but they vote all the time. They've probably never gone to the city council meeting or attended a legislative hearing, but they vote. And so I think, does my neighbor know what's going on, or do they not, right? And so think of someone in your life, your grandma, your neighbor, they're voters, they're somewhat involved. But if they don't know about the attack going on, it probably doesn't warrant a response from you, even though your emotions want you to.
And I would also add, you have your kitchen cabinet, and you can get intel from them as relates to from their outreach to say, hey, have you heard anything about this? Has this gotten any, traction? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. And I'm going to lift up what Daniel said. Don't let the haters throw you off your GOTV plan, which is true. Don't let them change your universe. All right, Leah, next slide.
Next slide. Yeah, so as Faith mentioned a moment ago, at this point when you're at GOTV, this is that final stretch. This is now we are at the last leg of the race. So ideally you are done with fundraising. Congratulations, yay. Ideally, we're saying, right? Because depending upon, the circumstances, you may have to do some fundraising to deal with some issues that may pop up. So if you aren't done, you can utilize this opportunity to focus on your message of urgency, right? And that can help you to engage tactics that can help you to maximize even more the amount of touches or voters you can connect with to help you to get to your win number. So that could look like if you weren't able to afford canvassers at this point in your campaign, let's say you're 60 days in, right? I know for me, when I started to get attacked by my opponent, that's when I all of a sudden saw money coming in that helped me to get canvassers to actually go out and help me to reach more doors, right? To pay for ads, to do mailers. So again, there are some opportunities with fundraising with GOTV, especially based off urgency. And as it says here, use those attacks against you to raise money from your base. Say, hey, my opponent is saying all kinds of things about me that are not true. I need to combat this misinformation so that way people aren't persuaded to not turn out to vote. And tell them, be authentic, be real, tell them what's at stake. Sometimes people think, if you've won a primary that, okay, this person got the election in the bag, it's all over and done. It's like, oh no, there's still the general election. So the other piece, be prepared to spend money that's coming in late. So Vote Run Lead, as Faith said, we have a number of trainings online. We actually have a training around fundraising. And so I love this reference that Faith uses as it relates to creating your campaign budget. You got your Pinto budget, your minivan budget, and then your Cadillac budget, right? So I always like to quote one of my favorite poets from the music world, James Brown, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready, right? So you want to have all three budget types so that in case you do get unexpected influx of money, I see something like, do I remember Pinto cars, right? You know, you could call it, you know, the low budget car, you know, hoopty, whatever that car was for you that, you know, got you from point A to B. But nonetheless, it wasn't a huge amount of resources. So again, you want to be prepared for whatever money that can come in to help you to fundraise. Again, to take it outside of card terms, you know, your gold, your silver, your bronze levels. Yes. So again, be prepared, because a lot of things will pop up during GOTV that may at first appear as disadvantages that you can actually pivot to an opportunity. Next slide.
Yep. Yes. I love the James Brown quote, Leah, right? And I wouldn't rely on late money, but that's why you have the Cadillac budget. That's why you have the gold budget. So in my last campaign, in October, I raised $150,000. That wasn't in my budget. Now I wanted to be smart and strategic with it, so I had my Cadillac budget, and was ready to make sure that I spent it on hiring more canvassers, on more mail, on more digital ads. Those were all ready to go. So there's a whole lot of reasons at the end. People are going to say, oh, I have to defend you from the attacks, I need to donate money. Voters are just going to start paying attention, so they're going to want to give you money. And your enemies, frankly, are going to be like, oh man, she's going to win. I better get her on my side. So be ready for that. Data management is really, really important. And in your resources we gave you a Slate article about how voting in every single state happens. And so this is going to vary on state by state on how you manage data and what type of data you need. In general, if you are in a mail ballot state, you want people to vote by mail, and you want them to either drop it off at a box or turn in as soon as possible. One, because then campaigns start bothering them. But two, you don't have to spend money on them anymore once they turn out, right? If I turn in my ballot October 17th, the day I get it, campaigns don't have to spend money on me anymore. And your campaign doesn't. So we want people to vote by mail, by absentee. We want them to turn it in person if possible, mail it on time. That data is going to be recorded. Figure out how in your state you get that data so that you can stop spending resources on those voters that have turned out. Share where they can turn in mail ballots or absentee ballots and how that works. Encourage early voting. If your state doesn't have mail ballots or absentee ballots, and you have early voting, try to get people to show up early. It's when the lines aren't going to be as long. They're not going to be as exposed for coronavirus as much. Try to get people to vote as early as possible. Also, they're not going to see the attacks against you when they're voting early, right? So bank those votes, get them in. And make sure volunteers and staff are tracking vote planning information. So if you have a whole batch of voters that say, I'm going to participate in the Souls to the Polls vote on this particular Sunday, and then by Tuesday, your county clerk has recorded who's voted, and 15% of them didn't vote that Sunday, you want to be able to follow up and be like, hey, you told us you're going to vote this Sunday, you didn't vote, right? What's your new plan? So really make sure you're voting, your data management is tracking this information on vote plans and if they've actually do it. Hold check-ins and strategy updates every time data is updated. So again, that's going to be different by state. For example, in my race, we got data dumps twice a day. Once in the morning, once in the afternoon on who voted. We immediately ran it through our data process and updated our numbers because you don't want to be spending money on people that already voted. Yeah.
Also, I'll just add with this as we go to the next piece, data, good data can make or break your campaign. If you have abysmal data, that will absolutely have an impact on your campaign. So can't stress enough, having a good data management program, protocol is super duper important. I just wanted to lift that up. So the next piece we want to share is the field plan. Yeah, so as Faith said at the top of our conversation, GOTV should feel like a new campaign, and that may be hard to fathom, especially if you've been out in, all kinds of, weather, now with COVID, you know, and like you can't even count the number of Zoom calls you've been on, and you just feel exasperated. It's like now is the time to like re-energize. And so one of the things that I have found to be useful is like everyone likes to create a space to celebrate, right? So you want to celebrate that you've actually reached this point, right? So you want it to feel like a new campaign, not just simply to get your volunteers who have been with you from the beginning or new folks that are coming in, but also for you as the candidate. So for your field plan specifically, you want to, for mail-in ballots, early voting states, they typically start 4 weeks out from election day. So you want to put the specific date on your field plan. And so we actually have a tool with, you know, your calendar, so you can, again, track when this is happening. For in-person voting, so for folks who are planning to vote in person, you want to have a plan for that. And you want to start 2 weeks out from the election with all hands on deck for what we call the Final Four. We want to throw in a little sports reference there. But again, 2 weeks out. And again, you want to determine your universe and aim for a minimum of 7 GOTV touches. Because again, these are folks that you have identified that have said, yes, I am voting for you. We just have to make sure that they have actually gone to vote. So whether they have sent in their ballot already, you want to confirm that, yes, I sent it in, etc. Or if I voted early, you want to track all that and get all that in.
Yep, absolutely. And when Leah says she means 7 touches, we mean that you have contacted that voter 7 times in your brand new GOTV campaign plan. And so your plan, especially this year, is going to be mostly phones, text, digital, and mail. Some places are doing doors or lit drops safely, but really, when you're doing a lit drop, you can't make that plan with the voter. And so if your campaign is choosing between a lit drop or doing more phones and text, I would encourage you to do more phones and text because of all those best practices that Mary said of making a plan, having them do self-actualization about why they want to vote. You are able to give them social pressure. So create your budget based on your universe and how many contacts you want to create, not on how much money you think you can have, because I promise you it'll raise the money. And then enhance with a volunteer plan. And so we've been running or working on campaigns for, so long now. And for many voters and many volunteers, they start paying attention October 1st, which is perfect because now it's GOTV time. So make sure just as money is going to come in late, volunteers are going to come in late as well. And that means that you need to be able to utilize them, train them. Both Mary and Amanda talked about the importance of training our volunteers so that they know all about best messaging and also voter protection. So be ready for that influx of volunteers because they're going to be like, oh my gosh, it's October. It's a month to election. Here I am. And that leads into our next point. This is the time to excite your base and be energized from your base. Right? You've been in a marathon. It's the last 2 miles. Have them cheer you on, get to the end because they're ready and they're energized and they have the energy starting October 1st to help you.
We actually do have a good question on like the difference between sort of excite and annoy, right? Like, all right, I'm voting. Like I've already mailed my ballot in, like there's such different just communication this year. What are your sort of top tips if someone's like, honestly, I'm voting, please don't call me. How do you
until their ballots in, don't trust it.
Yep.
And be annoying. Like it's just worth it. Be a gnat, be annoying. Some voters are going to push back. Some are going to get really annoyed. We actually incorporated into our GOTV script. If you don't want us contacting you, turn in your ballot. Like we won't contact you anymore. So it will feel hard to get that feedback. But it's minimal feedback and it's actually working, right? So keep going, be in that for a while.
And I'd also say for volunteers that express concern, that's where the training comes in for them to understand that you have to, there's intention, there's science behind, because life happens, people forget. It's like, oh yeah, I plan to turn this in and then something happens. So definitely, as Faith said, you still gotta keep coming to them, absolutely.
This is Melissa Ray, and I can just, testify that it really works well to even inform the person that you're talking to, like, as, let them know, let the voter know that you receive reports of who has a ballot out or who hasn't voted, and you receive those every day. So once they turn it in, like Faith said, but a good way to get the point across is just to let them know, inform them, and educate them how it works, and that they will appear on your list to contact them every day until it's actually done. And it's just a good way to go, oh, I didn't realize that. And then it's also a way just to sort of hold them accountable, but in a nicer way than saying you're holding them accountable. And it really seemed to work. So I did that for the primary, and I think I had some really good results with it.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to hand it off to Leah. We have a minute left.
So this is actually a good segue to the next activity we're going to do in the mini session around creating that personal GOTV plan. And so one of the things that we have found, especially with the influx of information everyone gets, is that why voting is important. We talked about that earlier. We have to make it personal. So in this next section, we're actually going to dig into how we can make our vote more personal. How are you actually going to create a plan? How are you going to identify 10 people in your life that you will personally take responsibility for turning out to the polls? Also, volunteer with Vote Run Lead for at least one or more. We encourage more, but we'll take one. GOTV shift, and volunteer with a local organization or candidate, because there's also something about being in the midst of a campaign for you to feel that experience, because that also can energize you, but also give you more context as to why having a personal GOTV plan is so important.